right, welcome everybody. My name is Kyle Buller. I'm one of the co-founders here at Psychedelics Today, and today we are going to chat about how to get your start as a psychedelic-informed practitioner. Um, all right. So in today's webinar, we'll explore some of the current and future opportunities in psychedelics, the value in psychedelic education, some of the current barriers to training and education. This webinar is also being sponsored and hosted from our Vital program. That's our 12-month certificate program here at Psychedelics Today. So we'll be chatting about the program towards the end. And then also different ways people can get involved in the field. So as I mentioned, my name is Kyle Buller. I'm one of the co-founders here and also VP of Training and Education at Psychedelics Today. Joe and I, the other co-founder, got Psychedelics Today started around 2016. We met in the fall of 2015 through mutual breathwork teachers that we studied with in Vermont. Their names are Lenny and Elizabeth Gibson, and they run an organization called Dream Shadow. What got me on this path to really kind of explore psychedelics and consciousness was, well, I was always kind of interested in consciousness at a young age, really interested in my dreams and all that stuff, kind of exploring. And then, as you grow older, your ego becomes a little bit more developed. Maybe you tune off from those different realities. But then I had a near-death experience when I was 16. I got in a really traumatic snowboarding accident, ruptured my spleen. Doctor said if I came in 5 or 10 minutes later, I would have been dead on arrival. And that was a really transformative and powerful experience in my life. And I had a really hard time integrating that experience. Didn't really have any mentors or really any resources to look at how to navigate it. Ended up coming across psilocybin, I think when I was 19. And I had this experience where I was able to kind of relive my near-death experience in a really unique way and help to recontextualize the psycho-spiritual trauma that I was dealing with. And I remember coming out of that going, kind of scratching my head, asking the question, how could somebody ingest something that grows from the earth that could replicate death like that all over again? So I became intellectually curious and fascinated about what was going on there, what's going on in the brain, how could a substance like this just produce such profound experiences. So that led me to do an undergrad in transpersonal psychology. Went to this little school up in Vermont called Burlington College. Really kind of unique opportunity to study transpersonal psychology, and that's where I met my breathwork teachers, Lenny and Elizabeth. They were hosting a 1-credit weekend workshop in holotropic breathwork, and had a really profound experience there, and just started to really study and mentor with them over. I guess it's almost been 13 years, almost going on 14 years with them. And then spent some time in the mental health field, working with at-risk teenagers and crisis stabilization, and also at a really unique residential home for people experiencing early episode psychosis, and that was in Vermont as well. Did my master's in clinical mental health counseling with an emphasis in somatic psychology. Worked at a university providing counseling to college students, and then also had a small little private practice working under supervision and doing ketamine psychotherapy. And have recently put a lot of my therapy practice on pause since we got really busy here at Psychedelics Today and running Vital, which has been very fun. I kind of like being in the education space a bit more at times. So what's been going on in the psychedelic world? There's been an evolving psychedelic conversation that's been kind of really kicking off in the past decade or so. And it feels like around that 2018, 2019 point, things really started to change on more of a cultural level. And so there's been a resurgence in clinical trials and research. That has really kind of started to kick off a lot of the interest here. And then also people are starting, I think, to get a little frustrated around standard treatment approaches. I hear it quite often. People just feel like they aren't getting the type of treatment they want in some traditional services. And that's not to bash traditional services, right? They are life-saving for a lot of folks. But there has been this interest where people are looking for maybe quote unquote alternatives to psychedelics or to regular treatments. And psychedelics are part of that, right? So, we're starting to see people get more interested in these alternative methods, whether it's psychedelics, breath work, or acupuncture, all sorts of different things. Um, and then there's been a lot of change and policy reform that's been happening in the United States and also globally. We're starting to see smaller local initiatives kick off in certain cities and towns to decriminalize psychedelics. And then we're also seeing statewide initiatives like what happened in Oregon and Colorado to legalize psilocybin for adult use. And I know California had a bill in, and I think the governor vetoed it. But these initiatives are continuing to be put forward, which is causing policy reform, which is very exciting. And as I mentioned, yeah, this shifting public perceptions on psychedelics. I think a lot of us here might be in a little bit of a psychedelic bubble, right? We might have this deep interest. We may have a lot of friends and colleagues that are interested in this. But we're also dealing with a little bit of stigma still, but there is this changing narrative around it. And more people are starting to become interested in the therapeutic potential with these substances. And I find it just fascinating with people that I know or just people I wouldn't expect to be interested in these substances. And then all of a sudden talking about, being really interested in microdosing, which is, whoa, wow, people are coming out of the woodwork. People are changing their minds around this. And no pun intended to Michael Pollan there, how to change your mind. And ketamine, this is starting to become a little bit more mainstream in psychiatry and therapy. People are starting to become a little bit more open to this. And I know ketamine has had a really kind of interesting stigma and taboo with some folks. Mostly people think, oh, ketamine, horse tranquilizer. This is maybe used in veterinary medicine. I'm not going to touch it. But now ketamine's been used off label for psychiatric disorders and can be a really great treatment option for some folks dealing with depression. And then with the psychedelics kind of coming online, there does require a unique kind of skill and approach to this work. And for those that are traditionally trained, say in psychotherapy and psychiatry, I like to say sometimes there's a little bit of an unlearning that may need to happen in some of these approaches as well. We talk a lot about this more self-directed, inner-directed type of approach when it comes to this work. And, maybe how does that, yeah, I don't know, maybe bump against on some of our traditional training. And then there will be a demand for practitioners. There's going to be a bottleneck. And so this is the importance of training and getting people educated around these substances and their therapeutic potential, and also the potential risks as well, and being really honest about it. So yeah, the field is growing. When I got started and decided to go to school back in 2010, I remember I was telling folks I'm going to do this transpersonal psychology program, and I'm really interested in the therapeutic use of psychedelics. And people are like, "What? Like that doesn't exist. That's not even a thing." And I honestly was, went down that path because it was kind of part of my own healing path, and I kind of needed an intellectual container to understand some of my earlier experiences in life, and thinking, maybe I'll have a career, in my 50s in psychedelics, and who knows, this stuff might take a long time to get past. And it's been really interesting to see how much things have really changed over the past few years, and how fast it's moving. I didn't expect it to be moving this fast, which is exciting. It's an exciting time to be part of it. So just show a little bit of graphs here around the resurgence in clinical trials. And so we can see 2010, 2011, there were studies going on. And then, really starting to increase around this 2017, 2018 mark. And MDMA really starting off. Psilocybin was also being investigated pretty early too at Hopkins. And now psilocybin takes up a lot of the research, so a lot of interest and exciting news. I did just see yesterday that MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, just submitted their application for a new drug approval for the FDA. So fingers crossed, we may be seeing all the hard work that MAPS has been putting in with their clinical research to see MDMA to be an approved medicine, hopefully in 2024. I guess it will be up to the hands of the FDA to see if they'll approve it. But I think the clinical data suggests that it is worthy to rescheduling these substances and having new interventions for post-traumatic stress disorder and depression and et cetera. We can also see here the increase in publications over the years. For those that are just kind of dipping their toes in, maybe thinking this is new, actually, psychedelic research has been around since the 50s, 60s. LSD was probably one of the most researched compounds back then, which is really interesting. And I think there was maybe over I forget how many articles that really came out around that time. And then it kind of started to go silent. A lot of the research started to go into the dark once the war on drugs started to take place. And then we see a little bit of a peak here in the early 90s. And some of the earlier research was with Dr. Rick Strassman investigating the DMT and reintroducing that. It was some of the first psychedelic research that started to take off since the prohibition of psychedelics. And for those that don't know about that, there's a really interesting documentary called DMT, the Spirit Molecule, and then it's also a book called DMT, the Spirit Molecule. And that was actually one of my first introductions to this field after that psilocybin experience that I mentioned when I was 19 or 20. I was at a bookstore and came across Rick Strassman's book, and it had nothing to do with DMT. Why I picked it up. The reason why I picked it up, there was something in the subtitle suggesting research into mystical or near-death experiences, and it was the near-death experience thing that really caught my attention. And then, yeah, as we can see, as from the previous slide, as more research started to happen and take off, obviously more publications are unfolding as well. Um, and just a quick comment, if you have any questions or anything like that, you can drop them in the Q&A section. We do have the chat enabled, but sometimes I have a really hard time keeping up with the chat and answering questions in there. We'll save questions towards the end, but if you do have a question, you can drop it in the Q&A section just so it doesn't get completely lost in the shuffle of the chat. And then we can see also shifting public perceptions on psychedelics. And so we can see here the orange is research related, as we saw in the previous graphs on research papers, but then also non-research related articles being published. And this 2018 mark, I always, this is just kind of a hypothesis and maybe some speculation, but that was around the time that Michael Pollan released his book, How to Change Your Mind. And we did at Psychedelics Today also see an uptick in curiosity around this. I think maybe close to 80% of our emails that came in during that time after the release of his book started off with, I just read Michael Pollan's How to Change Your Mind. I'm really interested in psychedelics. And Michael Pollan is a prolific writer and also has a wide range of an audience. And for him to come out to speak about the psychedelic topic, I think really got people interested. And so we actually saw a pretty interesting spike in curiosity from folks that may have it was actually interesting. It was like a lot of folks that grew up in the 60s and maybe have put that interest on hold and then coming back to it later on in their lives. I remember getting a lot of emails around that. So we do have this public perception that's also shifting on psychedelics, which is really exciting. And as that public perception shifts, as the clinical data comes out and more research continues to happen, there's a lot of money that started to come into the space. For those that have been following the market for a while, you did see a huge spike and then a dip. There have been some biotech companies that started and then kind of folded. But with any new market, right, we're going to see lots of ups and downs in the market. We have a bunch of the hype that happens, and then some of the realistic expectations come into play, and markets dip, and then also thinking just about the general economy. But according to DataBridge market research, the psychedelic market, they're estimating will be valued around 8.3 billion by 2028. And then the psychedelic drug market is valued at 4.87 billion in 2022 and expected to reach close to 12 billion by 2029. And we have seen lots of different kind of drug development and companies come online in the past few years. And it's where a lot of the money has really kind of gone into, it seems like. From the policy reform that's been going on, as I mentioned, there's been a lot of decriminalization measures that have been going on. And I just want to pop up a quick little graph here. Let me go back. Moving ahead. There's this great little map from Psychedelic Alpha that has really kind of outlined um, what's been going on in different states here. So you can kind of hover over each state here. So Washington, for example, has a working group on the medical use, but we also have some places like Seattle and Port Townsend. They have decriminalized. And I think there was a county, Jefferson County, the whole county decriminalized naturally occurring psychedelics. Then we have places like Oregon and Colorado that had a statewide ballot and initiative that passed that legalized psychedelics for, well, in Oregon, they legalized an adult use psilocybin model where people can go in and receive services. And Colorado, it's called the Natural Medicine Act, I believe. And so this kind of went a little bit beyond what Oregon did, but decriminalized a lot of the natural medicines and also has created a regulatory legal framework to receive services as well. Yeah, all these little dots are just examples of the cities and towns that have decriminalized plant medicines, really kind of streamlined by decriminalized nature. And so what that means is that it's the lowest priority for law enforcement, theoretically, and it's just usually for local jurisdictions. And so there sometimes is a little bit of confusion around decriminalization and legalization. Like I remember when, for example, Denver passed their measure to decriminalize psychedelic mushrooms in 2019. Everybody thought that was all Colorado and it was more legal. There was a lot of confusion around the terminology there. When really what happened was the city of Denver decriminalized it, which reduced it to low priority. And so theoretically, law enforcement of Denver shouldn't be arresting or putting city resources to prosecuting those that are growing and consuming psilocybin mushrooms. And yeah, so just kind of to highlight the differences there in decriminalization and legalization. Yeah, and as you can see, there's different states that have active bills in the works that are in purple here. And then Jersey is here in orange. And I'm originally from New Jersey, and remember when this happened. So somebody actually snuck in a decrim clause in the cannabis bill, and somebody caught it. But they actually just lowered an ounce of mushrooms down from a felony to a misdemeanor. If somebody didn't catch it, it would have been decriminalized fully, which would have been pretty cool. But yeah, somebody caught it when they were voting on it. So yeah, we talked a little bit about Oregon's Measure 109, which legalized adult use of psilocybin mushrooms. And so what that means is that this I think was pretty interesting because a lot of the psychedelic research is looking at the medicalization of psychedelics. So really thinking about how to make it into an FDA approved medication so that you could use it in therapy. What Oregon did with their adult use model is that they legalized the use for folks to receive at a service center. And you didn't need a psychiatric diagnosis. So you didn't need to meet a depression diagnosis or a PTSD diagnosis to receive a service. So anybody can go to a service center in Oregon if they're interested to receive those services there. And that is up and running at the moment. You can go to Oregon, find a service center, and receive a psilocybin facilitated session. And then Colorado's Prop 122 that just passed. They're in the works, and they're trying to roll that out, which is exciting. And we're also trying to see how it all gets rolled out as time goes on. And then we've also seen some policy reform in harm reduction services. So legalizing injection sites and then also testing services as well. And then Kentucky actually just had a bill to do, I forget how much money, it was a couple $1 million to fund ibogaine research for opiate use and to see if that could be a treatment, which is exciting. I think there's been a little bit of changes. I haven't been following all the updates over there, but yeah, really interesting. And Amber, you had a question really quick. Any stats on the rest of the world? Yeah, sorry, this is very US centric with what was going on here in the US. So Australia actually legalized psilocybin and MDMA for therapeutic use under the guidance of a medical professional. And that almost kind of came out of left field. There was an organization, Mind Medicine Australia, that was really working on initiatives, and they kept getting kind of shut down. And it was last February because remember I was at a conference at in Miami called Psychedelic, and we heard that news. So that I don't know how that's been rolling out. I think it's been a pretty slow rollout in Australia, in the way that that's unfolding. But yeah, Australia did legalize psilocybin and MDMA for therapeutic use, and then Portugal has some pretty liberal drug laws in general with a lot of decriminalization. You have places like Jamaica that actually never made psilocybin mushrooms illegal. And so there's a lot of retreat centers and mushroom work that's going on in Jamaica. And also in Holland, in the Netherlands, you can go into a smart shop and you can buy truffles to then, so there's a really interesting Dutch drug laws are really fascinating. I was spending some time over there in the past few years and learning about how some of the what do they call them, coffee shops that sell cannabis work, and just some of the interesting kind of loopholes there. But at one point, psilocybin mushrooms were legal to buy and consume in the Netherlands, and I think it was possibly due to the increase in tourism around that. They made it illegal for the fruiting bodies, and somebody was telling me the way that they rewrote the law, they got away with keeping truffles legal. So you can go into a smart shop in the Netherlands and buy truffles. And so what truffles are is, if you're familiar with mushrooms, you have the underground part of the mushroom, the mycelium, and then you have the fruiting body, is what most people are familiar with. But in certain strains of psilocybin mushrooms, I think it's like the Mexicanas and a few others, that there's a what they call sclerotia that grows within the mycelium, and that's the truffle node. And so that's what's legal in Holland and the Netherlands to buy. So people are doing retreats over there as well. Um, Switzerland also passed a compassionate care use, and so under again the medical providers, people can prescribe psilocybin and I believe LSD as well for compassionate care. And usually it's folks that are heading towards the end of life and stuff like that. I don't know all the kind of requirements to receive those types of services in Switzerland, but things are changing. I also heard through the grapevine that maybe Germany is looking at some sort of policy reform. I don't know all the details around it, but they might be looking at it as well. So yeah, things are happening throughout the world. Just exciting. This just kind of shows a little bit of a graph. So yeah, this is coming from Clerkenwell Health, just around kind of the demand and also looking at a little bit of the bottleneck that happens. And right now, it's if we're looking at the medical model and thinking about therapists and psychiatrists, a lot of the bottleneck is starting to happen around also not having a lot of therapists and psychiatrists in general, right? And then also thinking about the training that needs to take place. So if we're already kind of lacking therapists and psychiatrists, and then we're going to start to roll this out in a clinical setting that's FDA approved, there's going to be a bottleneck in providers that can actually provide this. And, there's a lot of debate on how much training do people actually need to be able to facilitate psychedelic sessions. And as I mentioned in the beginning, maybe it's a little bit different of a skill set at times and kind of different theoretical frameworks. And there's lots of different opinions. I just came across a debate article. I didn't watch it, but just skimming through some of it, this debate around whether you need psychotherapy in conjunction with the medicine, or is the medicine doing all the work, and you're just kind of doing drug treatment versus, say, psilocybin assisted or MDMA assisted psychotherapy. And then I think one of the biggest bottlenecks, and we've also kind of seen this in some of the MAPS training too, not enough training opportunities. So you can go through maybe an education or a training program, but then where do you get training opportunities when that's so far and wide, right? Like we don't have that many opportunities. A lot of people are, maybe going to places overseas where they're getting retreat experience. A lot of folks in the medical and therapy world, they're starting to get a little bit of practice and opportunities by working with ketamine. So just having these opportunities to work with non-ordinary states with that therapeutic frameworks. A lot of people are going towards that ketamine as a framework to kind of get some training. I think breath work is a really great training modality as well, to just get some experience with sitting with people with non-ordinary states. Obviously, it's a little bit different than if you're doing psychedelic assisted therapy, but it can be really great training just to understand what it's like to sit with people that are having really big cathartic experiences. So just a little bit more around the demand and the practitioner bottleneck. So psychedelics treatments move closer to regulatory approval. There's an issue looming in the industry, the lack of trained professionals who can handle such powerful compounds. And again, it's taking a different type of approach. And again, there's lots of different kind of philosophies, ideas around how these medicines should be used, what's the proper container. But I mean, we could look at something like ketamine, for example. Here's again a really powerful compound, obviously much different than psilocybin, LSD, and the classical tryptamines. But again, a very powerful compound. If we take it strictly from, say, the medical biochemical approach, you're going into, say, a clinic and receiving ketamine as your antidepressant treatment. The drug's doing the work, right? And you're going in and just getting a session, you're receiving medicine, and it's doing the work on all the brain receptors and all that, versus looking at it from a perspective that people can have really profound transpersonal, sometimes mystical experiences on ketamine. And so that's a different type of container and framework. And how do we also train people around these really powerful compounds? And just since ketamine is available and lots of people are working with it, I have colleagues and friends who are physicians who use ketamine just in regular medical practice, right? And it's just viewed as, okay, we're using it as an anesthetic, and not thinking about maybe some of the power that people can have, like these deep kind of transpersonal experiences, versus maybe the therapist who's trained a little bit more in that psychotherapy model and understands some of the power. We have a friend and colleague who gave a presentation at a conference in Vermont where they practice community medicine, and they had to actually administer ketamine medically for a client who had a broken arm or something like that. But they're also psychedelically literate, and they understand that set and setting is a really important component of this. So instead of taking it as just a regular medical procedure, using kind of things around like dimming lights, also maybe staying there when the client was coming out of their ketamine experience, knowing that really potent emotions can come up during that time. So it's kind of a little bit of a different framework at times if you're viewing it from more of this holistic model versus just like a drug treatment model. And so experts like Dr. Stephen Ross over at NYU estimates, we could need tens of thousands of trained professionals when psychedelic medications come to market. So again, just emphasizing the need for trained, literate, and competent practitioners and providers. And right now we're just kind of talking about the medicalization of psychedelics, but there's so many other fields that I believe people, will need adequate training and education in. So giving extensive training is required to be a qualified provider of psychedelics. It's unlikely that the supply of sufficiently good facilitators will keep up with the public demand of psychedelic use. So again, coming back to this question, how long does it take to maybe train somebody to understand how to really work with these substances? Um, and there's all sorts of debates around it, lots of different opinions, where maybe you can take a short training program and just provide a little bit of therapeutic support, and you're good to go. Others believe, maybe you need a year of training, of in-depth mentorship, to really kind of understand, the nuances of working with these medicines. I know when Oregon came online, part of their training requirement is 120 hours and a 40-hour practicum. And Colorado is starting to look at that and say, maybe that's a little, that's a little too little of training. Maybe we want more training. Maybe that, we're shooting for 160 hours of theoretical and didactic training, plus the internship and hands-on training. When I was thinking that, I'm trained in breath work, and I didn't go into breath work with the idea that I wanted to become a facilitator. I went in really because I was curious around the technique and was just doing it for my own kind of like self-development and process. But it took me about maybe 4 years to think about feeling confident enough to want to go host a workshop. And that's not to say it's going to take everybody that long. I was obviously a lot younger and had less experience in a lot of things. So, people that are maybe more seasoned and have more skills can get trained quicker. But, it felt like it took me a while to really kind of understand the nuances of working with what Stan Groff would call experiences. If it did take at least 2+ years to get really adequate training just to get people in there, then we're really looking at a bottleneck. And so there's this, we need to balance realistic expectations versus, what is ideal, right? Would be ideal if we could get everybody through a multi-year program and get people trained. But, I think we saw that when Oregon legalized, and then the law was starting to become in effect and going, oh, wait, no, we actually, we need facilitators and these service centers because now the law is in effect. And, how do we get people trained up and in those positions? So here are just some examples of psychedelic careers that are client touching. So we're looking at prescribers, more in the medical world, physicians. And then we could then look at psychedelic assisted therapists. So therapists that are using psychedelics in conjunction with their therapy program. And then you have folks that are maybe operating in the underground. You have folks that are working in the retreat centers, the service centers, where some of these terms start to get used interchangeably, whether you're using guide, facilitator, practitioner, sitter, lots of different word choices there. But people that might be practicing in the underground, they're already doing this work. You have community practices, right? So if we're looking at local ordinances that have decriminalized psychedelic use, there's probably lots of ceremonies that are happening that people that may have more shamanic training that are offering these services to their communities. And then you have coaches. And then, so you have folks that are doing psychedelic harm reduction, integration, coaching. People are providing psychedelic integration, maybe preparation, online circles, stuff like that. And yeah, as I mentioned, retreat facilitators. There's people that are in the medical world, there's people that are operating in underground, there's people that are just not doing anything with the actual delivery or administration of psychedelics, and then are just doing the harm reduction and preparation, and then also helping people make meaning out of their experiences or help people to create goals. So maybe you had a really big insight and you want to turn that insight into action and reality. So you have those coaches that are helping people work with their experience, make meaning out of it. And then you have psychedelic careers that aren't anywhere like connected with the facilitation aspect or the medicalization. Um, so people in marketing and media, right? Psychedelics Today is a media and education company. And yeah, we do a lot of podcasting, we do these webinars, we deliver our education programs. And then as we think about service centers and FDA approved medications coming online, the supply chain, the drug development, maybe it's the growing and manufacturing. So people, these industries will start to blossom. Where do the service centers in Oregon get their mushrooms from? Right, they need to get it from a licensed manufacturer. And what does that supply chain look like? And how does a service center get up and running? So then yeah, well, I guess that was on the last slide with retreat providers slash service center licensed service centers in those states that are legalizing. And then you have consultants that are doing consultancy. You have folks that are on the legal and policy side of things, doing some activism. And then you have folks that are in the business and financial, sales, product development, as mentioned, education and training, and then the service center, clinic, dispensary owner. So, there's also lots of different ways to start to get involved in this field that are outside of what we originally would think of as a practitioner, a facilitator. People, there's a whole market that's starting to be start to become developed here. And so, also as a psychedelic business owner with our media and education company, I'm always thinking about like, who are the psychedelic literate copywriters? Who are the psychedelic literate graphic designers that we need, right? Or the lawyers that understand the law around it? Accountants too, right? Oh, like we don't have to really explain all these little details around what we're doing. You have a little bit of competency and literacy in that world as well. Um, and if you asked me a number of years ago, how would you get started as a career? I mean, and this is the information that I got from mentors and folks early on is going to get your clinical license or going into research, because that's really most of where the jobs were and how you would maybe get involved there as well. And so, my talk track years ago is, maybe go get your PhD, your master's in counseling, social work, psychology, go get a PhD in research, so you can do all this stuff. But things are starting to change, right? The field is starting to develop, and there's a little bit more opportunities. But a lot of people do continue with the medical aspect, and the therapy aspect. Maybe you had a session and it's like, oh, I want to be involved in psychedelics, and the first thing that comes to mind is to be a guide or a therapist. Um, and that's obviously starting to change a bit. But my question always to folks asking, how do I get involved in this, is, do you see yourself wanting to do therapy without the psychedelic? And a lot of people go, no, I really just want to work with the psychedelic part, right? But the reality is that as a psychedelic therapist, you're also going to be doing a lot of therapy. You might be doing a lot of preparation, integration, a lot of therapy in between dosing sessions, and it's also going to depend on maybe how the clinic operates. Like, I know some ketamine clinics that just do the ketamine experience, and then they outsource to other therapists and therapy clinics to do the therapy. So really asking yourself, do you see yourself wanting to do regular psychotherapy without the psychedelic? If the answer is yes, and you feel called to that field, become a good therapist first, right? Get that training under your belt, and start to practice that way, and then being able to add in more psychedelic informed practices on top of it, right? I think that's really important advice. Like, when I started getting involved in this, I knew I wanted to work with people and work in the therapy field, even though I was so interested in more of the psychedelic aspect. So, I went down the route of becoming a therapist first. Ironically, I've put that on pause, but it's something I do want to come back to, because I actually like doing therapy with folks. And psychedelics, to me, is just an add-on that can really enhance the therapeutic process. So, as we mentioned, like, the therapy and the medicalization is just one part of it. I'm really thinking about your own skills and your community. So, what does your community need, and what are your skill sets? What's your unique offering that you may want to offer to folks? And if it doesn't exist, how do you also be a pioneer that builds it? This is a developing field, and to some degree, anybody that's starting to get involved right now is a pioneer. I like to remind people that to work in psychedelics, you need to be a little comfortable with being uncomfortable and uncertainty, right? Uncomfortable with all the things that come up, and then, if you are working with folks, there's a lot of difficult emotions that arise, right? So sitting maybe in that uncomfortable, sitting with all those uncomfortable feelings at times. The uncertainty aspect is, we feel like we have a good roadmap, but laws can change at any time, and things are constantly changing, right? And so we don't always know. We have an idea, we have hope, we have optimism, we have the research that can help back stuff, and public opinion and all that. But laws are constantly changing; they're in flux, and so to be on in the beginning here, being comfortable with things just kind of being in flux. which can be really challenging at times to like, hey, what's going on, right? Sometimes it feels like people are like, oh, you have the answers, you know what's going on, but have a good pulse on things, but things are just constantly changing. I'm always surprised by, what how things are unfolding. um, so, lots of different opportunities to get involved outside of the medical and therapeutic models, and really think about that. Like, what kind of skills and unique offerings do you have to give to the world? We just released this document. We put out a survey and did a little bit of research here called the Emerging Psychedelic Workforce. So yeah, we gave out a survey surveying 130 of our previous Vital students and alumni, and asking them about their careers, their goals, and their motivations around getting involved in this field. And some of the outcome, yeah, some of the reports showed that 90% of people were wanting to get involved with psychedelics had personal experiences with it. So, right, sometimes people felt like they were called to this work because they had these experiences, and then feeling that there's a real benefit here, and how do I become an advocate and share this with the world? 81% plan and are working in with unspecific marginalized groups. I find this to be really interesting. 50% are interested in working beyond facilitation and therapy. So again, just kind of highlighting the fact that not everybody wants to get involved in facilitation and the therapy aspect. So that includes media, academia, biotech, finance, business, all sorts of different places. 47% of students are not switching careers, as they intended to incorporate psychedelics into their current career for the first time. So again, how do we maybe think about psychedelic more as a niche to what we're already doing, versus yeah, making like a total career shift, unless you're feeling called to a total career shift. There are folks that really want to make that. And then this was pretty interesting, that 98% of our respondents indicated that making a lot of money is also not their primary motivation to enter the field. And it does seem like there is a little bit of that in the psychedelic ethos, right? People feel called to this work. And maybe for some folks, it's a part-time job. They just really want to help people. They want to be an advocate. They want to be an educator. They just want to be able to, get the information out there. And then 63% acknowledge potential and personal professional risks of arrest, social, family issues with licenses, but also are undeterred by it. So also acknowledging that we're still talking about federally Schedule I illegal substances, but people feel so called to this work that, this is really about how you enter into the field. It's all about your risk analysis and your risk tolerance. And I'm looking at time and realizing we might only have 10 minutes left. So I'll try to rush through a little bit of this stuff and hopefully have some time for some Q&A. So lots of different kind of training opportunities here. We can look at drug-specific training, like something like MAPS, where you would get specific training in MDMA-assisted psychotherapy, or say the Compass training or USONA training that's in psilocybin-assisted psychotherapy. So once a drug becomes FDA approved, you're probably going to have to get specific training in their specific protocols. So even if you've done lots of different psychedelic trainings, if you want to work with MDMA, you're eventually probably going to have to do their training. I think some of these companies are looking at how to scale their trainings and make partnerships with different training organizations, so that it can scale, and obviously understanding that bottleneck and how do you get more people trained. And then you could look at professional organizations that are offering training. So like we're doing here at Psychedelics Today and Vital. with our 12-month training program in psychedelic informed practice, harm reduction, integration. Other organizations like Fluence, SoundMind, Embark actually has a free training online, a free intro. Definitely go check that out. We've integrated parts of it into our Vital program, and what they've been doing over there is really great. Third Wave, psychedelic support. You could look at the whole Oregon model and system of going down, becoming a licensed facilitator in those states. There might be training opportunities within academic institutions if you're interested in the research, getting involved on that level. The state level, so the only state level training that it's open right now is Oregon with their psilocybin training, and then soon to be Colorado. And then, we can look at the national level. I don't know any specific training programs in Jamaica, but we can look at getting training and then maybe going to these other countries that have interesting laws where you could potentially work as, say, a retreat facilitator in Jamaica or the Netherlands. Or, as I mentioned, Switzerland has a compassionate care use, and then Australia just legalized for therapeutic use. And then there's some global community training integration communities. Roz Watts has the ACER, which is really awesome. And then Nectera, I don't know too much about them. Um, but if you're also thinking about, what else could I get trained in? It's really awesome to get alternative and complementary training to psychedelics. So, what could actually help? Say, if you're interested in becoming a facilitator of some sort, what other modalities could be really helpful for getting for integrating that into your practice? So, we see tons and tons of integration specialists and psychedelic therapists go and actually get more training in IFS. IFS, internal family systems, seems super popular now. Actually, seems really hard to get into their training. They have a huge wait list, but that's a really great add-on to integrate into your practice. So, as I mentioned before, how do you become a really great practitioner, facilitator? And think about psychedelics as an add-on, right? So really learning maybe extra skills, developing the competency and literacy, and then adding psychedelics onto it. Acceptance, commitment therapy is really big. Mindfulness training. I'm trained in somatic work. It's a little maybe biased, but I think being very trauma informed and somatically informed doing this work is really important. So yeah, taking a trauma-informed training program or some of these other somatic ones like Hakomi, somatic experiencing, sensory motor. Again, I'm a little biased on the breath work since that was my training, and I feel like actually gave really great training for sitting with folks in non-ordinary states. It's I mean, back in 2010, 2011, and during that time, there, really weren't opportunities to have experiences sitting with people in non-ordinary states. So the breathwork framework actually was a really great framework to get training in, and transpersonal psychology. And then, if you're interested in, if you want to study naturopathic medicine, herbalism, and thinking about like, how could certain herbs and stuff like that, plants also complement psychedelic use as well. Um, Mentioned a little bit about the Oregon framework with their training. I'll just emphasize that they do have a residency clause, and you needed to be an Oregon resident before 2020 to be a facilitator, but that's going to open up to the public after 2025. So then after 2025, anybody can go. But there are Oregon specific psilocybin facilitator training programs that will accept people from all over the world. You necessarily don't need to be an Oregon resident to enroll in one of those programs, but you just won't be able to practice until they open that up to the public. Colorado, we don't know what that's going to look like yet, but the Oregon model is really interesting because, as I mentioned, it sits outside of the medical framework, and so it really opens up the opportunity for folks to get involved that might not have advanced training. So their training requirements are 120 hours of theoretical didactic training, 40-hour practicum, a high school diploma, GED, and 21 years of age. And I know there's some folks that are on the side of this should just be strictly for therapists and medical professionals. And then on the other side, I mean, it really opens up, makes it more inclusive, right? I always like to think, there are folks that are called to healing work that might just really embody that energy and that archetype, but weren't in the position to get higher education. And I constantly think about privilege and being inclusive, and that is one of the reasons why I kind of like this model. It feels a little bit more inclusive at times versus just keeping it towards the medical world. So that was one of the reasons why we decided to create Vital. Is that one of the barriers to training is that it has been kind of strictly gate kept for licensed professionals or folks that have certain religious training. And as we started to think about the field growing, more states decriminalizing psychedelics, more states having policy reform, we're going to need all hands on deck, right? We're going to need folks in their communities to really help educate folks around harm reduction, integration, kind of safe, informed practice. And so we've been a little bit more inclusive than some other programs because we believe, as I mentioned, there's going to be tons of opportunities out there in other fields. Um, and so, how do you develop some psychedelic literacy and competency when most of other programs are really oriented towards licensed professionals? And so, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see this field evolve. And so, yeah, some things that we focus on: acceptance of underground and legacy operators, people that have been working in the space. They want to have continued education, but maybe can't go into it because of that barrier of not needing a license. Really interested in bridging multidisciplinary modalities, prioritizing inclusivity of marginalized groups. We're pretty broad on the substances that we cover. We're not drug specific. So it's like if you wanted to become a psilocybin facilitator, maybe it's going down that license route in Oregon or soon to be Colorado versus, we're kind of more broad in the substances that we focus on and want to educate people about. And then, yeah, really honoring the value of personal experience and then how that has community impact. Really focus on experiential learning, retreats, study groups, and all that stuff. And I'm just looking at time and realizing we have about 3 minutes left. And then this focus on inner work and development, which is a really important part of it as well. And I'll skip through really quickly here. You can find the curriculum and some of our core teachers, guest presenters online, but just wanted to, let people know that our application is closing. I think it's on the 20th, not the 21st. And then our classes, our next round of Vital cohort will kick off on January 23rd. We have already started to deliver a lot of scholarships out this year, so our scholarship is a little limited at the time. But feel free to send an application in if you are interested in enrolling, and we'll see what's still available. So I think we have a few minutes left, so maybe I'll try to get to some of the chat and some questions here at, at the last minute here. So thanks everybody for hanging out. I know we're at the top of the hour, so if you need to drop, it's all good. Thank you for hanging out. All right, Michael, curious around retreats that you offer during training uses breath work, not substance itself. So the retreats that we have in the works that are planning for this year will be a combination of breath work and cannabis. And would love to get more integrated into the Oregon space as that's developing. Could you please share the link to the report in the chat? I can do that. I'll drop the emerging workforce into the chat here. Just give me 1 second to grab the link. All right, I'll try to scroll through the chat. Things do get lost. It's get a little confusing. Pierre, yeah, you're asking any credentials or degrees required for Vital. No, as I mentioned, we're trying to be a little bit more inclusive around who we have part of our program because, as I say, we want a lot of psychedelic literate and competent people out there. And, how do you bring this to either your work, your community, in a way that feels appropriate to you? And so, we're really looking for you know, why you're interested in this, what you're hoping to do with it, a commitment to a year-long process and the retreat component, and really just looking more at your character than degrees. Yeah. Right. Another question. Does the program teach how to work with clients during trip sitting or integration coaching sessions? Yeah. So our one module is really based on preparation, integration, or no, it's based on assessment, preparation. Sometimes I combine preparation and integration together because they are very important. The preparation is part of the integration process. So yeah, we have one module that's dedicated to harm reduction assessment, and learning about harm reduction techniques, how to have conversations with clients, talking about like informed consent and psychoeducation. And then we have a whole module on integration. So different integration practices, how people approach integration, and then we also have a new module this year that's really focused on inner work. And we think it's really important for you to engage in your own inner work. So you'll actually be doing a little bit of your own integration at times. So you can kind of figure out how you might want to work with that. All right. I probably have time for one other question. So yeah, Michael, I'm just seeing your question again around breath work and not substance itself. So yeah, as I mentioned in the past cohort, we have done international retreats with substances, and a little bit about it is just kind of changing in retreat partners for this year, and focusing a little bit more on what we can do here in the States. And we find that the breath work also combined with cannabis can really create a container in which like we can kind of create, I guess, like talk about our philosophy and the way that we view space holding. Sometimes when we partner up with different retreat centers using medicine, we're coming in more as just like helpers in a sense, and they have their own frameworks. And so what we found out over the years is trying to find really good partners that align with how we want to teach like our space holding framework. And sometimes that just always can't happen because some retreat centers have their own liability and they operate in the way that they operate. So yeah, there's just been some changes, and we've just been wanting to maybe focus a little bit more on that. But as Oregon and Colorado come online, I mean, this is something that we're definitely looking into where we can have a little bit more kind of control as things grow. Um, yeah. So thank you, everybody. Really appreciate you being here. Questions. Sorry, can't hang out longer and dedicate more time to questions. But if you have any other questions, you can feel free to reach out to us. It's just vital at psychedelicstoday.com. And yeah, you can reach out. Some of our team will get back to you. If you're interested in learning more about our Vital program, it's just Vital Psychedelic training.com. You can go on there, download the brochure, get some info. There's some links, everybody. Thanks again. Hope you have a wonderful week. And yeah, again, if you have any questions, just feel free to reach out. So take care. Have a good one.